guys, welcome to Priceless B Movies. I'm your host, Colin Price, and something that all my close friends know this, but my wife and I like to have movie nights when we can. Just invite friends over, have some food, watch a couple movies, and the films are always like similarly themed. It's like two movies that this actor is in, or two movies from this genre, or two movies from this year, whatever it happens to be. And I always thought it would be fun to do like one where we did The Witch from 2015, which I've also reviewed on this page, and then followed it with this movie just to see how two very different genres tackle very similar source material. I don't know, it's not a bad idea to have on the back burner. Love at Stake. Love at Stake is a comedy about the Salem witch trials. It's kind of like if Mad Magazine did something on the Salem witch trials. It's very much in the same vein as like Airplane, Blazing Saddles, um, those kind of like anarchic parodies from the late 70s, early 80s. And there's a lot going on in it, but the basic plot line revolves around the judge and the mayor of Salem deciding we're going to start accusing innocent people of witchcraft, and that way we can have them burned at the stake and we can take their land. And that kind of sets off the frenzy. But in the midst of all this, there's a real witch who shows up in the town and decides she's going to start messing with all these villagers. The humor tends to vary a lot in this film. I do think there are some jokes that are very funny from a historical perspective. There's an animated opening credit sequence that shows, how the Puritans came to America and tricked the Indians, and a lot of it's played for laughs. And more often than not, that kind of stuff really works in this film. But it does fall back quite often on, just like dick jokes, fart jokes, stuff that, you got a lot in those kinds of spoofs back in those days. And so it's interesting because I think like some of the humor works, some of it doesn't. You've definitely seen some of the jokes in this film in a lot of other movies by now, but I think seeing this, this was 86, 87, this must have been insanely funny at that point. There is a lot going on in this film, though. There's a lot of characters who have their own different personalities, their own plot lines going on. There's an assistant minister who's come back to Salem after several years abroad, and he's going to marry his sweetheart and all this. And there's the scenes with them are kind of like, I don't know, like they're really hit and miss. The jokes don't work as well. I honestly didn't care that much about them. But Stuart Pankin is the judge and Dave Thomas is the mayor. Those scenes are hilarious. I think I just appreciate that more. I appreciate the satirical jokes more. I appreciate all the jokes behind how these guys actually think they're going to get away with this, and how, it's very much kind of like a Pinky in the Brain thing going on, because the judge is kind of the brains and the mayor is this, just really pervy nitwit. And the dynamics between the two are great. It's one of those things like I'll find myself laughing at a joke and I'm like, I think the 8-year-old in me laughed at that, and the grown up in me thinks that that's just stupid. But the 8-year-old in me still laughs, so that's something. I got to give it credit for that. There are some fun cameo appearances too, especially by Dr. Joyce Brothers and Anne Ramsey at different points in the film, but this movie doesn't seem to rely on cameos as much as a lot of parodies of that era do. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's just something I noticed. I mean, it used to be you watch like the Naked Gun movies, and every 5 or 6 minutes there was a cameo by someone. It was almost like a drinking game. Every time there's a cameo by, a sports player or by another actor or actress. Especially in the third one. If you played that drinking game in the third movie when they do the whole sequence at the Academy Awards, you'd die of alcohol poisoning. But those movies were really famous for it. This one, not so much. Another thing that separates this movie from other films of its ilk is that this film is decidedly R-rated. Most other spoofs tend to be PG, PG-13. And like I said earlier, this one does definitely have its share of crude humor, but it even goes a bit beyond that. There's jokes about child abuse, about bestiality, certain things that I think you couldn't really approach too well with the PG-13 rating. And some of it's funny, some of it's not. A lot of this humor I really think is just going to depend on, who's watching it and what kind of mood they're in, because it is an incredibly silly film. You're never supposed to take any of it seriously for even a second. It is a parody. You got to take it for what it is. But even having said that, there's a lot of this that's in really bad taste. There's a lot of racist jokes that certainly wouldn't hold up today. There's a lot of jokes about repressed sexuality that go a little beyond, someone drawing a pair of boobs on something, and it's think that that might have been one of the reasons this film was never as popular, is because it did go that extra step further and try to be a bit raunchier and a bit cruder than a lot of other movies were at the time. I enjoy Love It Steak for what it is. I appreciate a good parody as much as the next guy, but I do think that this is going to be an incredibly subjective one. I could see someone watching this movie and not being able to stop laughing the whole time. I could also see someone watching this movie and not smiling once during the whole film. It's really going to depend on your sense of humor, and seeing as how I really don't know if I could necessarily recommend this to your average mainstream viewer. I'm going to go ahead and give Love It Steak 2.5 stars. I think it's almost a good enough film to recommend. I can certainly enjoy it as a guilty pleasure, but man, I could really see people hating this movie. I could see people taking offense to a lot of this movie. So, like I said, it depends on your sense of humor. You'll either really like this or you'll just think it's total crap. That's all going to depend on you. That's my review of Love at Stake. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more Priceless B movies.